the first high schools. There are two we're going to touch on: the English Classical School and the Boston High School for Girls. The English Classical School was also in Boston. It opened in 1821. It was located on the site of the future State House. It was at the top of a hill overlooking the city. It had such a wonderful view that I'm sure the people who were in the Massachusetts Congress coveted that ground when the new State House came up for adoption. It accepted boys who were in the area of 12, and it offered 3 years of study. Now, if you look at the age of the kids that it admitted and the time that they spent there, it's more of a junior high or middle school in terms of pupil ages and in terms of time of study. More what we would today think of as middle school aged kids. They were supposed to build upon the common schools. What were the common schools? Those were the ones out in the community. Articulation problems begin to get solved. I've got question marks after that because I'm not totally sure it happened. What do I mean by articulation? I mean smooth transactions, smooth transitions from one level of schooling to another level of schooling. What is it you have to learn in junior high that will prepare you for study in high school? What do you have to learn in high school that will prepare you for study in colleges? The English Classical School it moved to a new location in 1824, and it changed its name to the English High School. Where did that name come from? No reason is given. Number one, perhaps a reason: it didn't offer the classics, so why call it a classical school? In terms of high, there were some schools in Pennsylvania, German schools, that had used the word as early as the 1760s. I don't believe it came from Pennsylvania. I believe it was probably due to the appearance of an article. An article appeared in the North American Review in January of 1824, which is just before that move and that name change, which described the high school in Edinburgh, Scotland. Before I went over there on one of our cruises, I always called that Edinburgh. I was properly scolded for that and told by the lady guide in her best Scotch accent that it was Edinburgh. Moving on, the Boston High School for Girls. This was established a little later. It was established in 1826. It was the counterpart of the English High School, but this one was going to be for boys. And so you can imagine that every girl and her sister, cousins too, lined up for admission because this was a big happening in the lives of young women at the time. It was very popular. It was so popular that 2 years later, it closed rather than turn away any of the myriad number of applicants it would have had to disappoint. So, I mean, this is a failure. Yes, it's a failure, but it sends a message. It sends a message that young ladies are more than willing to go to school, which is something that probably many of the young males were not. The net result on down the road was to extend the local common schools to include the high school years. Now that's great, but it doesn't do much for the poor girls back there in I guess it would have been 1828 that were turned away because the common schools didn't hit big time until 10 or 20 years on down the road. Growth of the high school, its success hinged on 2 points, and we've already talked about those two. One was the non-sectarian nature of the schools. Were they public or private? And what about issues involving school prayer? Are we going to have school prayer? Are we not going to have school prayer? Both of those items are still in play today. Secondly, financial support. Who is going to pay for such a school? Support for financial support, that's probably too many supports, comes initially from an 1834 speech to the Pennsylvania state legislature by a gentleman named Thaddeus Stevens. Now, Thaddeus Stevens is going to come back. He's one of the gentlemen that leads the charge to impeach Andrew Johnson, who was the vice president that ascended into office with the assassination of Lincoln. So Thaddeus Stevens now is a good guy. Thaddeus Stevens later on is, depending on your point of view, either a good guy or a bad guy. Thaddeus stood up before the legislature and said, many complain of the school tax, not so much on account of its amount as because it's for the benefit of others and not themselves. This is a mistake. It is for their own benefit, insomuch as it perpetuates the government and ensures the due administration of the laws under which they live, and by which their lives and property are protected. And continues on. Why do they not urge the same objection against all other taxes? The industrious, thrifty, rich farmer pays a heavy county tax to support criminal courts, build jails, and pay sheriffs and jail keepers. And yet probably he never has had and never will have any direct personal use for either. He goes on. He never gets the worth of his money by being tried for a crime before the court, allowed the privilege of the jail on conviction, or receiving an equivalent from the sheriff or his hangman officers. And I grin a little on that because today we object to all kinds of taxes. We'd object to these too. Also is from Kremen, and I suspect that last Kremen notation that we had was from this 1951 source.